notes out, and I'm not going to like pull them out and read them. So I'll keep it very informal. And then, but the first thing is that general principle. I think technology tends to run ahead of policy and ethics. Look back at the Tower of Babel, and our ability to build things is, you know, we build it, and we get to a point where we're like, should we have built that? I don't know. That was such a great idea. And so there's something that Russell Kirk talks about it. If you're familiar with Russell Kirk, he talks about the creative imagination, the ability to like kind of think ahead wisely into the future. If you're a policy advisor, or if you're a strategic thinker thinking about the implications of the technologies that we're developing, if you're that type of a leader, we need you, because the nature of technology is that it just wants to race ahead as fast as it can in any direction it can. So we can celebrate Silicon Valley all day long. We can celebrate all the breakthroughs we're having, and if we don't have virtuous leaders to walk in that space, then we're going to continually live that history of the Tower of Babel, or Icarus, or whatever, Pandora's box. So that's the preface. Quickly, my background: graduated from the Naval Academy in 2002, first class to graduate after 9/11. So it was a really interesting kind of window of time for me to go into active duty service. Served in the Arabian Gulf on a ship, came back, became a foreign area officer, and was the assistant dean of students at the Naval War College. But my interests really were in social networking in Iran. So that got me pulled into this diplomatic corps for the Navy, and then before long I was advising some senior leaders in the intelligence community on leveraging social networking for intelligence. And in 2013 I got out, after traveling a bit in the Middle East, I got out and launched my own company, the Intelligence Community Inc. And a lot of what we do is we leverage social media in a very open way to help people in the national security space and intelligence space find jobs. Because what I'm seeing is a lot of compartmentalization. If you look at the 9/11 Commission report, it says that maybe 9/11 could have been prevented if we'd been more integrated and been able to talk to each other more. So in a very transparent, very open way, what I'm trying to do with my company is trying to get people introduced to each other in productive ways. And I know that's one of the things that Providence is doing in this type of event. So that brings me to the present. So I'm currently the Senior Policy Advisor for Department of Defense on cultural training. So underneath the Secretary of Defense, there's an office called Delencio. It sounds like an Italian restaurant, but it stands for Defense Language and National Security Education Office. And they have about a $40 million a year budget with everything that has to do with language, regional expertise, and culture training for all the Department of Defense. So I'm the Senior Cultural Advisor, Policy Advisor in there, in addition to my company. And then I'm also the Editor-in-Chief for the Foreign Area Officer Association Journal, which is an international affairs journal, comes out 3 times a year. So that's my background. Now, the theme that I picked for tonight, which was the ethics of surveillance in a transparent world, is probably too technical to really talk about in this kind of environment. So I'm just going to lob a couple key ideas at you. One is, if you've ever read any Orwell or Aldous Huxley, we have a dystopian idea of the future, which has already been projected for us, which is already in our media space. We can think about it a lot. One is the surveillance state. And that's the Orwellian view, right? The government is spying on you. There's been a lot of debate about what the ethical limits of NSA should be with PRISM and all this stuff. And then the other one is similar but different. It's the Aldous Huxley view, which is the entertaining ourselves to death. We're always doing selfies. We're always YouTubing ourselves. Basically, it's something that I call surveillance. We're not being spied on. We're spying on each other. And we've, through our laziness, given up all of our personal rights to any kind of privacy. And that's the culture we live in. So which one do we have? Do we have an Orwellian surveillance state, or do we have a Huxleyan surveillance state? And I would submit to you that depending on what regime you live under, it oscillates between the two. Perhaps you live in the world in a very oppressive regime, and therefore you have more of an Orwellian state, or maybe you live in a first world where it's much more Huxleyan. But we're seeing some of both right now, and when it comes to policy decisions, we have to, as virtuous leaders in that environment, we have to think about, okay, what's the right decision? We have to think creatively about what to do. So I know this is a group, it's a blended group. I'm a Christian, I come at these problems from a Christian perspective, and there are some biblical references for thinking about the future for this stuff. There's a reference in Daniel saying in the future there's going to be a lot of increase in knowledge, and people will be running back and forth. And then we also have talks in the Gospels about how in the future, maybe after the future, everything will be known. Everything will be proclaimed from the hillside, or we shall be known fully, whereas everything right now is not fully known. But rewinding from that moment is a conversation between Jesus and Pilate when he was brought in right before his crucifixion. And he says, I'm the truth. And Pilate says, well, what's the truth? What's truth? You've heard it recently said that we're in the post-truth era, but I would suggest to you again that post-truth era was Pilate's conversation with Jesus. And we're in a time when surveillance and surveillance muddies the water. We're in a time of inundation of information. We're in a time when wisdom has never been more important. So once again, creative imagination is important when we think about how to be virtuous in a surveillance state or a entertain yourself to death surveillance state. So now my questions are for you guys. Do you think?
Sorry. I'm sorry. So you're asking.
My first question to you is: as the culture changes and as we give away more privacy, which personally I'm kind of okay with because it forces me to have more integrity. If I get to a place where I give away all my privacy and I'm hopefully naked and unafraid before the world because I can't keep any secrets with all this technology around me, it's kind of an accountability thing, and I'm kind of thankful for it in a certain way. In another way, and as you've seen in the last year, it polarizes everybody because it shows all of our most opinionated parts, and it forces us into these orthodoxy clashes that Robbie George talks about. That we've maybe been able to hide a little bit over time, but now technology, it really brings us into a conflict with each other. But going forward, my question to you, maybe we can talk about it or we can talk about other things, is how do we navigate this? How are you going to navigate it personally with your iPhone in your pocket? Or if you're going in for a clearance and they're saying, oh, you have a lot of, you've done some trips overseas, you know a lot of people. Are you going to pull yourself into a clamshell and say, okay, I have to live in a box? Or are we going to lean into the future and say, it's going to be a very integrated world, but we have to have integrity? That's a little bit leading, so I didn't mean to do that. But, question?
Well,